Presenter today, we're going to have JB Friday. JB Friday is the Extension Forester for the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and he's based out of Hilo. He's going to be presenting twice today. And so this first presentation will be about other diseases that impact ohia trees. So JB, whenever you're ready, feel free to, to, to start.
Oh, good morning, everyone. So for this presentation, what I want to do is to go over some of the other things that kill ohia trees. And there are a lot of other things that kill ohia trees. The point of the takeaway for this position is so when you're in the field or someone sends you a picture of a tree, you can make some call as to, that looks like rod symptoms. We need to get that tested, or nah, that's something else. We're not going to bother with that. And especially for those of you who are not on Hawaii Island, who are tracking down every single symptomatic tree, I hope this will be a useful lesson. So if one of my team can, which screen am I showing? I'm showing the full side or the presenter mode?
I'm seeing you right now.
Yeah.
You're seeing me.
You have to share your screen with your presentation.
Yeah.
In presentation mode. There you go.
Okay, well, you think we've done this 1,000 times, but it doesn't always come in. All right, so what I want to start out with first is rapid ohia death symptoms. Usually the whole crown of a tree turns brown, and we named it rapid ohia death because it happens suddenly. Like these are trees that I drive past, a couple times a month, and then one day they're all brown. So it's a rapid, the entire crown turns brown, sometimes a branch or two or a fork, but usually the entire crown. And these external symptoms usually are going to hold for both Ceratocystis leucoohea and Ceratocystis huliohea. So you see this is sort of a typical progression with the tree on the right with green leaves, then the tree in the middle that's got all the leaves turned brown, and that can happen, the turning brown can happen over the period of a couple of weeks. So that's maybe that symptoms are maybe 1 to 3 months, and then after 4 or 5 months, you see on the left there where the trees start losing leaves. Large healthy trees go down. It's a really virulent disease. It's not a slow decline. So here are some of the rod symptoms. Now, and one of the other things to bear in mind is that we do now know that it takes months for the fungus to build up to the point where the tree collapses, right? It's like a heart attack. Someone might have plaque building up, and then bam, one day they have a heart attack. So this tree on the left here, it looks healthy. It could be full of Ceratocystis, but not showing symptoms yet. The tree on the right is someone that one wilted about, probably a year previously. Okay. So, then in the internal symptoms, very classically, especially with Ceratocystis leucoohea, is this internal black staining. So when we cut into the wood, we see that black staining, and that's just millions of fungal spores. That's just millions and millions of fungal spores in there that is staining the wood. You see this sort of this radial pattern around the outside. If you a tangential cut, you see those black streaks usually. This is a tree that's really far gone that Mark cut up. And what you're seeing here is the fungus moves up the sapwood. So in this tree, for example, the red bit here, that's heartwood, that's dead. That's not conducting water anymore. The creamy colored wood, that's sapwood that was conducting water until the fungus blocked the water vessels. Then there was no water to the crown. Then the leaves turned brown. And there's no external mushrooms, conchs, those things are other diseases. One other thing, now that I just mentioned it, a lot of people think lichens are a disease because lichens are that symbiosis between an alga and a fungus, right? A lot of people think lichens are a disease. Oh, my tree has this disease, then it died. Lichens are just epiphytes. So I should throw that into this presentation, that lichens are not a disease. So people see like the umikoa, the moss that hung, no, it's not moss, it's lichen that hang from trees. That's not a disease. Huliohea can be a little less distinct. One thing we do see sometimes with Huliohea is just this black line, the sort of fungal invasion layer. The pathologists have said, yeah, we sort of see it a little more smeary, a little less distinct, but to me, that's pretty subjective. And unless you've looked at lots of trees and then subsequently had the diagnosis, you're not going to tell that, but you will see some sort of streaking in things. Banana smell is a fermenty smell. Anything that blocks the vascular tissue, the sap, which is sugary, will ferment. And then it produces that kind of fermenty smell that you get. To me, it smelled like bagasse for anybody that remembers the Hawaii when we had sugarcane and plantations and the sugar mills were smelled like that. I remember my first trip to Lihue. It was just overwhelming in Lihue. I was about to say there's no external fungus. That's not exactly true with rod. There is external fungus, but they're microscopic. I should note on this. The picture on the above by Corey, that's at 40 times. The picture below is just with a macro. So that's actually, if you can just see the little tiny hairs of the fungus there, that's all there is for fruiting bodies for the rod fungi, for Ceratocystis. Again, they don't make mushrooms, they don't make conchs, they don't make bracket fungus. Those are all wood rot fungi. So when you see those growing on a tree, yes, the tree is, the wood is rotting, it's dying, but those aren't pathogens. Those are wood rot fungi. Okay, so what else kills ohia trees? I didn't make a poll of this, but you could put in the chat perhaps. And can I see the chat? I can't see the chat. What's the main thing that kills ohia trees in people's yards? Let's see if, and Amber, did anybody put anything in the chat there?
Not yet. Damage
All right.
to tree. There's one
Damage to tree. Yeah, that's a good call. The main
root
thing that
disturbance.
the
water
main
stress.
thing that kills ohia trees in people's yards is too much weed whacking and herbicide. And you see the tree at the left, very typical Hilo local idea of landscaping. You always herbicide around a tree so you get that nice brown circle of dead under the tree, and you hit it with a weed whacker so you break the bark. And so most of the time, and that will produce the crown symptoms of rapid ohia death because you've killed the tree with herbicide and the whole thing turns brown. But that is not, that's poor landscaping. That's not rapid ohia death. Now, something we're seeing more, and we are not really sure if this is increasing or just because we're looking for it more, and we see this, single branches, usually finger size or smaller, turning brown. What this usually is a, it's another fungus, but it's one that's been here, it's long-term here. So Fusicoccum or Phomopsis is typical symptoms of that disease. And the way you see it's that branch canker rather than Ceratocystis is the branches themselves swell up at the base, so that you see that it's a typical canker where there's swelling of the wood, the bark's all cracked. So if you see the branch looking like that on a tree, go up to the tree and you see if at the base of the tree, it's kind of swollen up like that and cracked, that's a different fungus. That's not Ceratocystis that does that. Julio will kill a single branch sometimes, but it's this swelling and cracking that you see. This is a different fungus, and the treatment for that is just prune off the infected branches, just typical arboriculture treatment. So the single or multiple tiny little branches on a tree or small branches on a tree that die are typically not a rod symptom. You see here instances of these kind of swollen branches that you'll see on this tree that it had a few branches on the tree dying, but not usually the whole tree death. Now, Mark Hughes, our pathologist, is following up on this. We're not sure, but it does seem we're seeing more of that. And is there an interplay between that and rod or that and Ostropoccinia? We don't know. So that's yet another disease we're tracking. Now, here's another disease, and this disease, this pathogen was the thing that worried us most about ohia before we got rod, but this one hasn't gone away. This is, and there's a number of foliar pathogens. And one of the things I really would like you to take away from this is that there are pathogens that attack the leaves or pathogens that attack the wood, the sapwood of the tree, and their symptoms are going to be very different. So Ostropoccinia rust arrived here in 2005, was first diagnosed on ohia seedlings. It is a worldwide epidemic. In fact, later this month, we're going to virtually a conference in Australia where all the Australians are freaking out about it because it went from South America to Florida to California to Hawaii and then on to Australia, got to New Zealand 2 years ago, and the Kiwis are freaking out about it. Really wide ranging. And this is the thing that you've noticed, and I should have this picture in here, but I don't. You noticed it defoliated all the rose apple in Hawaii. So about 10 years ago, all the rose apple really got hit and defoliated by it. We also see it defoliated in Ohia. And when you're standing back looking at the symptoms, and again, this is what I want to get through with this workshop, standing back looking at the symptoms, the trees are losing their leaves. The leaves aren't turning brown and hanging on the trees are losing their leaves. The up close symptoms are this yellow, the spores of this yellow powder. So you see this really clearly when they're sporulating. So when the fungus is producing spores, it's this bright yellow sulfur powder. After the fungus goes through its life cycle, you just see dead patches on the leaves. But again, it's a disease of the leaves. Mostly it has been on Ohia a problem on nursery plants, and any of the nursery growers growing Ohia are treating with fungicides in the nursery to keep it under control. Mostly we weren't seeing it on mature trees. We were seeing it on water sprouts or epicormic sprouts on the Ohia. It does really hit just that young foliage. Mostly it hits that young foliage. It affects hundreds of species in the Myrtaceae, in the myrtle family. In Hawaii, mostly rose apple, significantly Java plum, significantly rhodamyrtus over there on Kauai, and paper bark. It hits paper bark. It doesn't hit the strain we have here doesn't seem to be hitting our eucalyptus very much, whereas in other countries it's a pest of eucalyptus. Anyway, however, we kind of stopped worrying about it because we worried about rod. And then in 2016, we had these huge outbreaks on Oahu and Molokai, where it defoliated thousands of trees. And it turns out the Ohia doesn't bounce back very well from the defoliation. So again, people saying, I wonder if this is rod. We went up there and looked. What we're seeing, trees defoliated. We didn't see any trees with brown crowns. And then we saw those water sprouts. So what I'm calling water sprouts, epicormic sprouts here. The trees, so the wood is still alive. It's setting out its buds. So it's budding out. It's trying to recover by putting out new buds. So it's not that. And then when we look closely at the buds, on some of them, we saw this characteristic yellow powder. Now, if you had been in this forest 6 months previous to this, perhaps, you would have seen the rust on all the new shoots, on all the things. But once it's gone, the rust is kind of like a fire. It goes through, and then you don't see the rust, but you see the effects. I spent a whole day with a Brazilian looking for fungal spores, and we couldn't find any because it was just not the season. There were none that were sporulating. But this is indeed a huge, and we've seen similar outbreaks on Molokai. The Oahu outbreak came when they had a rainy summer. So they had, usually Oahu has a relatively dry summer or a wet winter. These photos I should note are from Po'omoho. And so what happened was they had 18 months of rainy weather, and perhaps that sparked an explosion of the Austrobaccinia rust. It's also called myrtle rust. In Hawaii, it started being called Ohia rust, but that's not really a good name for it. But why we had the outbreak on Oahu and not on Hawaii Island, where it's raining all the time, we don't have any explanation for. But here, clearly, it did kill mature trees. But again, the symptoms you're looking for are defoliation rather than, and here it was complete defoliation. And Will Weaver followed up on it, and his estimate is only about 50% survived that defoliation. The other thing is, mostly we find it on the glabrous varieties, and that's very interesting. And I think just the pubescence, the fuzziness of Enkena and Polymorpha protects against the rust. So the spores, this is a disease of the leaves. The spores land on the young, fleshy, glabrous leaves, and it attacks and infects them and kills them. They land on a mature pubescent leaf, and it can't get through the fuzz, so it can't attack them. So I've seen side by side a Polymorpha and a Waialeale. This was on Molokai, and the Waialeale was just hammered, and the Polymorpha was okay. And we saw this on Oahu, where you've got that mix of glabrous and pubescent varieties around. There are a number of other foliar pathogens, and again, what you're looking for is something that takes the leaves off or diseases of the leaves. This was a few years ago in South Kona. The landowner asked me to come look. She was afraid she had rod. And what I saw there was the tree's losing its leaves. It's losing its leaves lower in the canopy. Whereas rod, because it's a disease of the wood, the sapwood, the upper canopy turns brown because it's not getting any water. The leaves that are in the shade and a little bit of moisture environment, a little bit out of the wind, succumb to the pathogen. So the whole forest lost a lot of leaves of it, but the tops of the trees were fine. And we didn't see anything turning brown. Last year, I was over in Cloacomauca, North Kona, and again, people were complaining about diseases. Landowners pointed out they could see that the forest is spots where they never saw it before. But again, what they were seeing there was a foliar disease, and a couple different fungi were recovered from it. But you see, when you looked on the leaf here, see, there's that pink fungus infecting the leaf, and here's a black fungus infecting. This is in Kenya even. So there are a number of different foliar pathogens affecting it. For these seem to come and go in cases and times you've got these outbreaks of wet weather. They seem to come and go, and once it dries out, the trees refoliate. These are not diseases that seem to defoliate them completely, unlike Ostropyxinia, which really does seem to kill the trees once it defoliates them. These other diseases are things that the trees will lose a lot of leaves, but they grow back. And when the conditions are right for fungus, there are these outbreaks of the infection. When there's not so much fungus, the trees seem to grow back from them. Other things. I hope you guys recognize the Trioza galls. Now, for you entomologists, if they're entomologists, I know they reclassified Trioza, and I don't remember the new name. It was Trioza for many, many years. What this is a native gall insect that's on Ohia. So it's been on the Ohia for millennia. It is part of the native ecosystem. It's not a problem. I think it's really important for everybody doing extension and outreach to realize what this is, because people will think this is the strawberry biocontrol jumping to Ohia. Again, especially now as we're trying to get more distribution of the Tetracoccus for the strawberry guava biocontrol, the galls look kind of the same. To an entomologist, they look different, but to someone who's not an entomologist, they look the same. And people are going to start saying, oh, look, it's now on the Ohia. This is Trioza. It's always been here. It doesn't do a heck of a lot of harm to the Ohia, and you're going to see it. So just another Ohia disease health problem. Armillaria is more of a root pathogen. And so what you see here is on a dying tree, you see these white mycelial fans under the bark on a dead tree. And especially you see these, these are Mark Hughes' slides of mycelia, or these root-like structures, rhizomorphs growing around. This was one of the things they started wondering about for the Ohia decline back in the day. It does tend to be patches of it in the forest that kill all the trees. And again, this is one thing we noticed about rod, that on the landscape scale, rod trees would be scattered out. There'd be a patch with a lot of mortality, but they'd be scattered. Where something like Armillaria, which tends to be more root rot, there'll be a whole patch of dead trees that gradually gets bigger and bigger as the fungus affects the trees on the edge of the patch. So one of the things for forest health you can see is you can look at what's the landscape, what is the landscape pattern of the disease, as well as what's the pattern in the tree. And there's plenty of things we don't know. These pictures I took when we were in the park, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and we saw a bunch of trees, whole crown turned brown. We went and cut them down, and we found this weird yellow staining on them. No ceratocystis. Mark Hughes went back, he tested, and he didn't find any pathogen that he could find with that. So to this day, we don't know what that was, but there are other things, especially we've noticed in the park, because they've done such extensive sampling, that are killing Ohia trees. Here's another. This is in Hocklaw Forest National Wildlife Refuge, and the managers were concerned. They were concerned enough that this was rod that they had me up Sunday afternoon. They called me Saturday afternoon and said, "Can you come look at this right away?" And I said, "It's already 4 in the afternoon." They said, "How about tomorrow?" Okay, so we went up tomorrow. The symptoms we saw here, and again, this is one of the things I want you to pay attention to. It was all mixed, so there were a lot of dead There were a lot of dead leaves on the branch, but mixed in with a lot of green leaves. So it wasn't, if it had been rod, it would have been poof, everybody's the same. This was this mix. We sampled it. You saw the wood. There's no staining in the wood. There was no pathogen recovered. So we don't know what that was, but not rod. This looked a lot like rod. This was on Maui, and driving up, and you can see how rainy. That was one of the more adventurous drives I've been on, thanks to Adolfo for driving. And when we saw, looking from the side of the road, it's like, hey, look, tree turns brown. That could be rod, very much so. But what we saw when we got down there, we cut down some trees and cut the branches off. What we saw here was a classic fungal dieback front. So there's some fungus that's going down from the tip of the branch. That's usually not how rod progresses. So if you look at this one here, there's a fungus in there and it stops right there. So something is getting in the tip of the branches and going down. Many pathogenic fungi do that, but rod doesn't. So again, this is a different sort of thing. Pasteloptipsis was found there. A couple different fungi were found there associated with beetle attacks. So some sort of beetles attacking the tips of the branches and then fungi getting in. This was a case where standing back, yeah, it really could be rod. When we cut the tree open, we started seeing, yeah, those symptoms don't look like it. But given that it was on Maui, we brought it in for testing also. Other things with ohia, landscape scale dieback of ohia has been observed in Hawaii over the years, several waves of it. The last big one was in the 70s and the 80s when enormous amounts of the ohia forest on Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa died. And you still see the dead snags from those today looking across the landscape. Key thing about that is they did healthy regeneration came back underneath. The ecologist paradigm, the ecological paradigm is that it's a cohort senescence, which means that the whole group of trees that all died at the same time because they're all the same age died off, replaced by the next trees. And certainly there are pathogens involved, but they never detected any ceratocystis from that. South end of our island, we also see a lot of mortality from drought. So this is down Manuka and Kau on the south leeward side of Hawaii Island that it's been quite green the past couple of years, but it's had a lot of drought over the years and a lot of VOG over the years. So you have just a lot of environmental mortality from drought and VOG on that. Again, you're not seeing that characteristic brown crown of leaves. You're just seeing dead trees from that. All right, time for quizzes. So I'm faculty, I get to give people quizzes. So if we could launch the poll on this, the quiz for these trees is this rod symptom or not? You know, rod or not rod. So I will let people vote a little bit and we'll see if people can say, and again, for this group, for this lesson, really it's not a lesson on tree health diagnosis of all the things that go wrong with ohia, which would be pretty complicated, but do you recognize, yeah, that's not a rod symptom? We'll let some more people vote. All right, we'll end the polling and everybody recognized that that is not rod, or at least everybody who voted. 26 out of our 30. Hey, a bunch of you were afraid to vote, huh? No shame, you vote if you're that thing. Okay, what was it? You can put in the chat what you think those symptoms are. And again, I'm not seeing, oh no, here we go. Can I see chat? Ostropyxinia, very good. Yeah, that's the Ostropyxinia rust. Next quiz, if we could relaunch the poll. Simply, is this rod or is this not rod? All right, that's good. We don't have unanimous results on that. But almost everybody said, yeah, that's not rod. That's that sort of green leaves and brown leaves all mixed up together is something else. That tree it was injured by construction. It was in someone's yard. It did get a disease, but it wasn't Ceratocystis. All right, and now our next, there we go. If we can, oh, you already relaunched these symptoms. Oh, sorry. And again, what you're looking at is a large tree standing out from its compatriots. The whole crown's turned brown. All right, very good. And everybody agrees those are indeed rod symptoms. And that tree was diagnosed with rod, sadly. All right, so there's our website. That's the end of the presentation. rapidohiadeath.org for the website, and we can stop the sharing and maybe question and answer. If anybody had any other questions on things.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box at any time and we'll relay them. I don't see anything coming in yet, JB.
I
so-
get to ask questions if people don't, and I can even pick on people, say, okay, what is this a serious question? Have other people seen Austrobaccinia defoliation of mature ohia trees other than Oahu and Molokai people? Oh, okay. Ohia care tips and tricks. You know, for ohia care, I don't, you know, we have, and let me see if I can put this in the chat. Our college CTAR has a really nice series on landscape care. And if you go to our publications page, which I'll try to put in the chat, and go to landscape care, we have nice brochures on pruning, mulching, watering, all those good things for landscape trees. They all apply to ohia, and my particular favorite one is mulching, because the way you cure the weed whacker and lawnmower and herbicide injuries is you put some nice wood chips and stuff around the tree and put a nice border around it, you know, a border of rocks or whatever plastic around it, put wood chips to keep the grass down, and don't hit it with your weed whacker and your herbicide. That's the best thing. Fungicides for Austrobaccinia, rotate them. It depends where you're doing, and we certainly don't have landscape fungicides for it, and that's not going to happen. But for in the nursery, tebuconazole works. And then there are others. If you email me, I can look up the list of recommendations for that, or talk with some of the other industries. But tebuconazole is one. I'm sorry, I can't talk and type in the chat at the same time. Yeah, CRB risk, but you know, you got to figure out what mulch stuff is. Where else are we here? So tips and tricks on the website. The other fungi mentioned, what % of forest is affected with these? Well, there's fungus everywhere. These defoliation events with foliar fungus hit the glabrous varieties, most of them. That in Colocomalca, almost all the understory ohia, they were in that moisture understory thing, got partial defoliation. So sometimes you'll see most of the trees. For the Austrobaccinia, you saw almost all the glabrous ones. So like on Oahu, where you've got many genotypes, some of which are pubescent, some are not, you'd see half or more of the trees defoliated. Anything else quickly to turn the around? Rod and herbicides are the things that will do that. But that yellow stainy sort of fungus that we're seeing in the park that we don't know what it is, that will do it too. So that's why when you see it, it's really better to say this tree has rod symptoms rather than in the field make a diagnosis on the fly, because until you recover the fungus from the tree, you need the diagnosis. And I like to tell people it's like a sore throat, right? Not every sore throat is strep throat, but sometimes they are. Sometimes just your throat is dry because some other reason, and sometimes it's strep throat. You got to have the lab test. So if the tree is showing the symptoms, the whole crown turned brown at once, then go in for the lab test and see what it is. If it's some of these other symptoms, like it's still got lots of green leaves, but then you see necrotic spots on the remaining leaves. Necrotic means dead. That is a foliar pathogen that you don't need to worry about it.
JB, you want to wrap it up soon so we can do the
Yeah, I'm just
survey?
answering questions. So if we are,
I think we're almost, yeah.
I think we have, yeah, 2 more questions I see there. Any recommendations on the best fungicides for
so
Austria?
I'm going to put in the chat tebuconazole, and I probably am not going to spell it right. If you email me, I will look up, I've got a document with it on that. And for fungicides, you want to rotate your fungicides so they don't develop resistance. But Rally is one that I think has a nursery label. Always apply fungicides, pesticides according to the label. So make sure if it's in your nursery, it's got a nursery label.
JB, if you can also put your email in the chat box too, in case anyone needs to email you.
Okay, I will do that. This is our website, cms.ctar.hawaii.edu. Go to the publications, go to landscape publications, and there's a real nice series of landscape publications on these useful things like watering and pruning and mulching and all those good things. And they're all perfectly true for ohia, even more so because it's not like monkey pod. You can't abuse it and expect it to come back. If any of you on this website and this call have questions about ohia and landscaping, feel free to send them to me. Please do not send to me homeowners, everybody in the world who's got an ohia tree in their yard and wants to talk for half an hour. I do not have time to chat with people for half an hour about what their landscaping is. If anybody has forest and you want to send them to me, if they use the magic word forest, my forest, I'm happy to talk to them. If their word is my tree, I've got this tree out front, it's really special because blah, 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 you can talk to them. If you have technical questions, feel free to ask me, but I don't have time to chat with everybody about their landscaping.
Great.
All right, if there are no more questions, thanks very much for listening. And yeah, we've got lots of other events going on.